The tempest of the warp churned and split like a wound in reality, spilling impossible colours across the void. On the bridge of the Imperial Navy vessel, luminous judgment, warning klaxons wailed as servitors jerked to automated life, their augment limbs cataloguing the anomaly that had manifested 3,000 km off their starboard bow. Captain Darius Vex gripped the rail of his command throne, knuckles whitening beneath the skin, as his ship's augs detected a small craft tumbling free from the tear in space. Xenos incursion. He hissed through clenched teeth, armed the forward batteries. But something stayed his hand, a presence unmistakable and ancient. It brushed against his consciousness like the faintest whisper of a forgotten song, carrying neither the agonizing discord of the daemon nor the cold clarity of the witch. The captain raised a trembling hand. "Belay that order," he said. "Dispatch the boarding party. I want whatever emerged from that rift secured and brought before me." In the tumbling X-Wing starfighter, emergency systems flashed desperate warnings as life support systems threatened to fail. Inside the cockpit, a man opened his eyes, consciousness returning in painful fragments. His gloved hand moved instinctively to the lightsaber at his belt, fingers brushing the cold metal with familiar reverence. Luke Skywalker reached out through the Force, sensing the vast and terrible darkness that surrounded him. This was not the galaxy he knew. The Force itself felt wrong here, corrupted and twisted into something both familiar and horrifically alien. "R2," he whispered, but the faithful droid remained silent, its systems overloaded by the transition through what Luke could only describe as a storm unlike any he had encountered. The last thing he remembered was pursuing a distress signal near the unknown regions, then a sudden violent maelstrom that had swallowed his craft whole. Now through the viewport he watched as a massive vessel of brutal Gothic architecture approached. Its prow resembling some ancient cathedral merged with the deadliest weapons technology could devise. Luke closed his eyes, centering himself in the Force as he had been trained. Whatever this place was, he would face it as a Jedi. The boarding torpedoes struck the X-Wing with calculated precision, magnetic clamps securing to the hull. Armoured giants tore through the fuselage with disturbing ease, their ceramite gauntlets ripping away metal as though it were parchment. Luke felt their approach, minds burning with zealous purpose, and unclipped his lightsaber. When the first Space Marine of the Nova Marines chapter breached the cockpit, bolt pistol levelled, he found a calm-faced man waiting for him, empty hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I mean you no harm," Luke said. The Space Marine, Brother Sergeant Tauros, regarded the stranger through targeting lenses that analysed threat patterns and anatomical weaknesses. "You have emerged from the warp, mutant," he replied, his voice a vox-distorted growl. "Your corruption is presumed." Luke sensed the intent microseconds before the trigger was pulled. His lightsaber ignited with its distinctive snap hiss, the emerald blade intercepting the mass-reactive bolt. The round detonated against the energy weapon, its explosive force dissipated in a shower of sparks. 7 more Astartes warriors crowded into the confined space, bolters trained on the impossible sight before them. "Witchcraft," one snarled. "Heresy," said another. Luke moved with preternatural speed, his blade a blur of green light that deflected the initial salvo. He had no desire to kill these warriors regardless of their intentions. The Force flowed through him, guiding his hand, allowing him to turn aside their fire rather than harm them. But in the cramped confines of his fighter, surrounded by transhuman killers engineered for war, even a Jedi Master found himself quickly overwhelmed. A shot grazed his shoulder, searing flesh. Another impacted near his feet, shrapnel tearing through his flight suit. Luke gathered the Force and pushed a telekinetic wave that sent 2 Marines staggering back into their comrades. In the momentary confusion, he leapt upward, cutting through the ceiling of his beloved X-Wing and emerging onto its hull. The void of space should have killed him instantly. But the luminous judgment had already extended its void shield, creating a pocket of breathable atmosphere around the captured vessel. Luke stood atop his fighter, lightsaber humming in hand, as more armoured giants emerged to surround him. Beyond them, he saw assault craft and gun servitors taking position, dozens of weapons trained upon him. "Stand down," came a voice amplified and imperious. A figure strode across the hangar bay, flanked by robed attendants swinging censers of incense. "I am Captain Vex, master of this vessel. You will surrender your weapon and submit to interrogation. Warp spawn. Luke deactivated his lightsaber but kept it in hand. "My name is Luke Skywalker. I am a Jedi Knight, keeper of peace. I have no quarrel with you or your people." Vex's face tightened with suspicion. "Jedi. I know of no such order among the sanctioned psychers of the Imperium," he gestured, and a dozen red targeting lasers danced across Luke's chest. "Your weapon now." Luke sensed the minds around him, a tapestry of fear, hate, and absolute conviction. These were not meant to be reasoned with easily. Yet beneath the surface fervour, he detected something else in their captain. Curiosity, perhaps even hope. Slowly he placed his lightsaber on the hull before him. "A wise decision," Vex said. "Restrain him. Prepare the null fields." Massive power moles charged with crackling energy surrounded Luke as the Marines closed in. He allowed them to place the heavy manacles upon his wrists, suppression fields humming as they activated. Immediately he felt the force grow distant, muted like a voice of herd underwater. The sensation was disorienting, nearly painful in its suddenness. As they marched him through the labyrinthine corridors of the vessel, Luke observed the ship's inhabitants with growing concern. Servitors, more machine than human, moved with vacant purpose. Crew members prostrated themselves before symbols of winged skulls and double-headed eagles. Everywhere hung the stench of fear, of fanaticism, of a culture built upon the twin pillars of sacrifice and obedience. They brought him to an interrogation chamber where tech priests waited with chirurgical instruments and mind probes. Captain Vex observed from behind a shield of armoured glass. "Your craft bears no markings we recognise," Vex began. "Your weapon defies analysis by our most skilled artificers. You will tell us from which system you hail, which power you serve, and how you survive direct passage through the warp without Geloff fields or navigator." Luke sat calmly despite the restraints that bound him to the cold metal chair. "I come from a galaxy far from here. I serve the light side of the Force, an energy field created by all living things. As for how I arrived here, I was investigating a disturbance when something pulled my ship into what you call the warp." The tech priests exchanged glances. One leaned close to Vex, whispering urgently. The captain nodded. "The Ordo Xenos must be notified." Vex decided. "Until then, the prisoner will be held in the null chamber. Extract what knowledge you can, but keep him alive." For 3 days they probed Luke's mind with psychic scrutiny and mechanical devices that sent lightning through his nerves. They drew blood and analysed its composition. They placed his lightsaber in sealed containers and subjected it to every scan and test their technology allowed. Through it all, Luke remained composed, answering their questions truthfully, even as he felt their disbelief and growing unease. On the 4th day, everything changed. The luminous judgment shuddered as its warning systems blared to life. Luke, still confined in his cell, felt the disturbance in the Force long before the alarm sounded. Something vast and malevolent had found them, something drawn to him. Captain Vex was halfway to the bridge when the first teleportation flares erupted throughout his ship. Crimson-armoured figures materialised in controlled bursts, their armour adorned with the 8-pointed star of chaos. Word-bearers, servants of the ruinous powers, led by a towering figure whose armour writhed with demonic faces pressing outward from within. "I am Koron the Enlightener," the Chaos Space Marine champion announced over the shipwide vox. "We have come for the one who walks between realities. Surrender him, and your deaths will be merciful." Vex drew his power sword, its disruption field crackling to life. "All hands to battle stations," he commanded. "Purge these heretics from my ship." The corridors of the luminous judgment became killing grounds as loyalist and traitor estates clashed in brutal close-quarters combat. Bolter-fire tore through bulkheads. Chain weapons roared as they bit into ceramite plate, and battle cries to the Emperor mingled with dark praises to the Chaos Gods. In his cell, Luke reached out through the Force, past the nullfield suppressors, sensing the slaughter unfolding around him. These warriors, loyal and traitor alike, fought with a savagery that chilled him to the core. But worse was the psychic presence that accompanied the invaders, a consciousness ancient and hungry that probed the ship like searching tendrils. It was looking for him. The door to Luke's cell suddenly slid open. A space marine stood there, his blue armour scorched and dented from battle. "The captain sends his compliments," Brother Sergeant Toros said, deactivating the restraints with a coded command. "It seems the traitors want you more than we do." Luke rubbed his wrists as the null field dispersed. The force flowed back into him like a torrent, nearly overwhelming in its intensity. "My weapon?" he said. Tauros produced the lightsaber from a maglocked compartment on his thigh. The captain thought, "You might need this. Consider it a gesture of imperial pragmatism." Luke took the familiar hilt, its weight centering him. "Thank you." "Do not thank me, witch," Tauros replied. "When this is over, if we both live, I will execute you myself as the Emperor demands. But today, we face a greater evil." Together, they moved through the ship's arterial corridors, encountering pockets of desperate resistance. As the word-bearers pushed toward the central command deck, Luke fought alongside the Space Marine, his lightsaber, a blur of emerald light that cut through traitor armor with impossible ease. Where Luke passed, Imperial guardsmen and Navy armsmen looked upon him with awe and fear, whispering prayers to their god-emperor as the stranger wielded powers they associated only with damnation. They reached the bridge to find it under siege. Word-bearers' Terminators, massive in their tactical dreadnought armor, were breaching the final defensive perimeter. Captain Vex stood with his command staff, power sword in hand, prepared to sell his life dearly. Luke stepped forward, channeling the force into a massive telekinetic push that sent 2 Terminators staggering backward. The others turned, their helmets focusing on the new threat. "The anomaly," one growled, voice distorted by vox emitters. "Take him alive, the sorcerer demands it." Luke ignited his lightsaber. "I'm not going anywhere with you." The lead Terminator charged, power fist humming with destructive energy. Luke sidestepped with Jedi grace, his blade slicing through the warrior's wrist joint in a shower of sparks. The severed gauntlet crashed to the deck as its owner bellowed in rage and pain. The remaining word-bearers opened fire, a fusillade of bolter shells that Luke deflected in blinding arcs of light. One redirected shot caught a Terminator in his helmet lens, detonating inside the enclosed space. Another struck a power conduit, unleashing a gout of plasma that engulfed a third attacker. Captain Vex seized the opportunity, leading his bridge crew in a counterattack that drove the remaining traitors back toward the blast doors. For a moment it seemed the tide had turned. Then the air grew cold. Frost crystallized on metal surfaces as reality itself thinned. A tear opened in the center of the bridge, spilling forth unnatural light and the stench of corruption. Through this portal stepped Koron, the Enlightener, his Terminator armor writhing with faces that whispered and leered. Beside him floated a figure in ornate robes, its feet never touching the deck, eyes pools of warp fire that fixed immediately upon Luke. "I am Magister Vul," the sorcerer announced, voice layered with unnatural harmonics. "You do not belong in this reality, traveller. The dark gods have taken notice of your arrival. They have questions only you can answer." Luke felt the psychic assault before it manifested, a probing tendril of warp energy that sought to invade his mind. He raised mental barriers as Yoda had taught him, the Force responding to his will, creating a shield around his consciousness. The sorcerer's expression registered surprise, then grudging respect. "Impressive," he said. "You're no ordinary psyker. The power you wield, it tastes different. Purer, uncorrupted by the warp yet capable of manipulating reality. Fascinating." "The Force is not for your masters to study or corrupt," Luke replied, lightsaber held in a defensive position. Val smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. "All power serves the ruinous powers eventually, whether willingly or not." The sorcerer gestured and reality distorted around Luke. The deck beneath his feet liquefied, attempting to swallow him. Luke leapt upward, somersaulting over the trap, only to find Koron charging toward him, power scythe sweeping in a deadly arc. Luke met the blow with his lightsaber. The weapons connected in a spectacular discharge of energy that threw both combatants backward. Luke recovered first, using the Force to accelerate his movements as he closed with the Chaos Champion. His lightsaber slashed across Koron's breastplate, carving a molten furrow through Kamite and the corrupt flesh beneath. Koron roared, more in rage than pain, and counter-attacked with transhuman speed. His massive gauntlet caught Luke with a glancing blow that sent the Jedi crashing into a command console. Warning klaxons blared as ship systems registered critical damage throughout the vessel. Luke pushed himself up, tasting blood. These warriors were unlike any he had faced before, their strength and speed enhanced beyond human limits. Even with the Force, he found himself hard-pressed to match their raw physical power. Meanwhile, Majest Vul had turned his attention to the Imperial defenders. With a word of power, he emulated 3 bridge officers where they stood, their bodies consumed by warp fire that burned with impossible colours. Captain Vex charged the sorcerer, power sword aimed for his heart only to be frozen in mid-stride by a gesture. "Your soul will make an excellent offering," V said, raising his staff to deliver the killing blow. Luke reached out through the force, seizing the sorcerer telekinetically and hurling him away from the captain. Vashed into a bulkhead, his concentration broken, releasing Vex from the psychic hold. "Kill them all," Vex ordered, his voice steady despite the blood streaming from his eyes and ears. "Initiate self-destruct protocols. The luminous judgment will not fall to chaos." Majest rose, dark energy crackling around him. "You test my patience, anomaly," he snarled at Luke. "Let us see how you fare against the gifts of the warp." The sorcerer's form began to change, limbs elongating, flesh rippling as demonic energy poured into him. His robes split as his torso expanded, revealing mutated flesh covered in eyes that blinked and tracked independently. From his shoulders erupted chitinous growths that formed secondary limbs, each ending in talons that dripped with virulent poison. Luke felt revulsion rise within him, but mastered it. He had faced the darkness before, both without and within. This abomination, however horrific, was but another manifestation of the same darkness that had tempted him, that had claimed his father. "Your powers come from pain and corruption," Luke said, centering himself in the light side. "Mine comes from life itself." Luke extended his hand, channeling the Force not as a weapon, but as a purifying light. The energy that poured from him was neither aggressive nor destructive, but anathema to the corrupting influence of chaos. Where it touched Val's mutated form, the sorcerer screamed as demonic flesh smoked and withered. "What is this?" Val shrieked, recoiling. "This power! It burns, it cleanses, it is like the Emperor." Captain Vex whispered in awe, watching as the light emanating from Luke drove back the corruption. Coron, seeing his sorcerer ally in distress, redoubled his attack on Luke, forcing the Jedi to break his concentration. Luke spun to meet the champion's charged lightsaber clashing against Power Scythe in a deadly dance of light and shadow. Each blow sent cascades of energy across the bridge, systems shorting out, monitors exploding. "Your light cannot endure in this galaxy," Coron growled, pressing his attack here. "Only hatred has the strength to survive." Luke felt the truth in those words, sensed the millennia of war and suffering that had shaped this reality. But he had faced despair before and found hope on the other side. "Then this galaxy needs the light more than ever," he answered, finding renewed strength. Luke channeled the Force into his movement, becoming a blur of speed that even the enhanced senses of a space marine struggled to track. His lightsaber struck with precision, finding the weak points in Curon's armor, systematically disabling the Chaos Champion joint by joint. A slash severed hydraulic cables in his left knee, another cut through the power supply to his scythe, a third opened his shoulder pauldron, exposing the corrupt flesh beneath. Coron, recognizing defeat, triggered a teleport Homer concealed within his armor. "This is not over, Lightbearer," he snarled as his form began to shimmer. "The Dark Gods know your name now, Luke Skywalker. They will haunt your dreams. They will turn your light to shadow." As Coron vanished, Magister Val unleashed a final desperate psychic attack. Tendrils of warp energy lashed out in all directions, seeking to corrupt and destroy. Luke drew deeply upon the Force, creating a barrier around himself and the surviving bridge crew. The conflicting energies met in a cataclysmic detonation that tore a hole in the ship's hull, exposing the bridge to the void of space. Emergency bulkheads slammed down as atmospheric generators struggled to maintain pressure. Luke, thrown against a command thrown by the blast, looked up to see stars through the breach, cold and distant. Among them, a single Imperial vessel was approaching, its profile distinctive and ominous. Captain Vex, bleeding from a dozen wounds, dragged himself to Luke's side. "Black ship," he gasped, pointing to the newcomer. "The Inquisition comes for you." Luke helped the captain to a more comfortable position. "What does that mean?" Vex laughed, a wet sound as blood bubbled from his lips. "It means Jedi Knight that you have traded one enemy for another. The Inquisition hunts witches, psychers, those touched by the warp. They will either use you or destroy you." "I've faced Inquisitors before," Luke said, thinking of the Empire he had helped topple. "Not like these," Vex whispered. In the name of the God Emperor, they will burn worlds to ash if they deem it necessary. Run, stranger, run while you can. Luke looked around the devastated bridge. The surviving crew watched him with expressions ranging from fear to wonder. He had saved them, yet he remained an outsider, a potential threat in their eyes. The Force whispered warnings of dangers yet to come. The black ship grew larger in the viewport, a vessel designed for a single terrible purpose. Luke made his decision. "I need a ship," he said. The inquisitorial boarding party found an empty bridge and a missing escape craft when they docked with the luminous judgment. Inquisitor Matthews Rowe, a thin figure in ornate power armor adorned with purity seals and sacred texts, surveyed the destruction with cold calculation. His augment eye whirred as it analyzed residual energy patterns, recording everything for later study. "The anomaly was here," he stated. "I can feel the echo of its passing." Beside him, Sister Argenta of the Sisters of Silence nodded, her presence negating the lingering warp energies. Though unable to speak due to her null maiden vows, her hand gestures conveyed what her psychic senses could not. Something had been here that even her null aura found difficult to categorize. Captain Vex, now secured to a medic gurney, looked upon the Inquisitor with defiance despite his injuries. "He saved us," Vex said, "when your precious Imperium could not." Rose's face remained impassive. "Salvation from one who walks with warp powers is no salvation at all, Captain. It is merely damnation delayed." He turned to his retinue. "Access the ship's logs. I want everything they recorded about this Luke Skywalker. His abilities, his weapon, his craft, everything." Sister Argenta made a sharp gesture, drawing the Inquisitor's attention to a scorched section of deck plating. There, burned into the metal as if by great heat, was the outline of a sword of light. "Yes," Rowe whispered, kneeling to trace the marking with an armoured finger. "A most interesting quarry indeed. The hunt begins." Across the sector, Luke Skywalker guided the stolen Imperial shuttle through the unfamiliar stars, the Force, his only compass in this dark new galaxy. He sensed conflict everywhere, worlds burning, souls crying out in terror and despair, and beneath it all, a presence both familiar and alien, a light so bright it threatened to blind him, a will so powerful it bent reality around it. They called him the Emperor. And somehow, Luke knew their paths would cross. For now, he followed the currents of the Force toward a distant world where he sensed a gathering of minds untainted by the corruption he had witnessed. Perhaps there he might find allies. Perhaps there he could begin to understand his purpose in this galaxy of endless war. The shuttle accelerated into the darkness between stars, carrying its lone passenger toward an uncertain destiny. Behind it, the hunters gathered. Inquisition, Chaos, and others who had yet to reveal themselves, all drawn to the light of a Jedi Knight lost among the stars of a galaxy that knew only war. The Force crystals in Luke's lightsaber hummed with resonant energy, responding to the strange new currents of power that flowed through this reality. As stars streport, Luke meditated upon what he had seen and learned. This imperium of man built upon fear and superstition, the entities they called the Chaos Gods feeding upon suffering and despair, the constant war that consumed countless lives. It was the dark side, triumphant yet still opposed by those who fought for something more. He had sensed it in Captain Vex, in the common soldiers who stood their ground against horrors beyond comprehension. A stubborn defiance, a refusal to surrender to darkness, even when hope seemed lost. Perhaps that was why the Force had brought him here, not to fight a war that could never truly be won, but to rekindle something these humans had all but forgotten. The possibility of balance, of peace. Luke opened his eyes as the shuttle's senses detected a new presence. A massive vessel had appeared seemingly from nowhere, its hull an organic lattice of bone and chitin rather than metal. Tyranids, according to the shuttle's identification protocols, Xenos predators that devoured worlds. The Force warned of imminent danger as smaller bioships detached from the hive vessel, moving to intercept. Luke's hands moved across unfamiliar controls, preparing for evasive maneuvers. Once again, he found himself alone against impossible odds in a galaxy determined to extinguish all light. But he was a Skywalker, and Skywalkers did not surrender to darkness. The stolen shuttle banked hard, engines straining as Luke pushed the vessel beyond its design parameters. Behind him, The Tyranid hunter organisms adjusted course with disturbing coordination, bioplasma weapons charging. The first volley lashed out, missing the shuttle by meters as Luke sensed the attack through the force and evaded. R2 would call this a bad idea, he muttered to himself, scanning the system for any potential sanctuary. The shuttle's coitators identified a small moon orbiting a gas giant, its surface dotted with the ruins of what had once been an Imperial mining outpost, now abandoned, perhaps due to the Xenos incursion. Luke plotted a course for the moon, hoping to use its irregular surface to evade his pursuers. As he approached, however, he detected energy signatures from the supposedly deserted facility. Someone was still there, holding out against the Tyranid swarm. The shuttle bucked as bioplasma caught its starboard stabilizer, systems shrieking in protest. Luke gripped the controls tighter, reaching out through the force to maintain stability as the craft entered the moon's thin atmosphere trailing smoke and debris. On the surface below, a ragtag group of survivors watched the damaged Imperial shuttle descend, pursued by Tyranid flyers. From the command bunker of mining station Kappa 119, Colonel Jared Kell of the Cadian 203rd lowered his magnulars. Imperials, he stated, voice carrying the weariness of a man who had watched his command dwindle from a full regiment to fewer than 50 souls over months of constant siege. Someone made it through the blockade. Beside him, Tech Priest Dominus Val clicked his mechadendrites in agitation. Illogical. The Tyranid organism has maintained space superiority for 73 days. No Imperial vessel has approached since the astropathic distress call was sent. Kell handed the magnulars to his second-in-command. Tell the gun crews to provide covering fire. Whatever poor bastards are on that shuttle, they deserve a fighting chance. The surviving heavy weapons of Kappa 119 roared to life. Autok cannon shells and last cannon beams reaching up to intercept the pursuing Tyranid flyers. One bioconstruct exploded in a shower of ichor, its wings shredded by concentrated fire. The others scattered, circling wearily as their prey approached the human defences. Luke guided the damaged shuttle toward the outpost, grateful for the unexpected assistance. Through the force, he sensed the determination of the defenders below, their life signatures burning with resolve despite being surrounded by an overwhelming alien presence that hungered for their very essence. The shuttle's landing struts deployed seconds before impact. Luke channeled the force to cushion the crash, the vessel skidding across rocket landing pads before coming to rest against a stack of supply crates. Emergency systems released the cockpit seals as fire suppression chemicals smothered the electrical fires that had broken out across the instrumentation. Luke emerged from the smoke, lightsaber in hand but unignited. A squad of Imperial guardsmen approached cautiously, las guns trained on him. Their uniforms were tattered, their faces gaunt from prolonged siege, but their discipline remained intact. "Identify yourself," ordered their sergeant, a woman whose left arm ended in a crude bionic replacement that appeared to have been assembled from mining equipment. "Luke Skywalker," he replied, keeping his hands visible. "I'm not your enemy." Colonel Kell pushed through the squad, studying the newcomer with the calculating gaze of a veteran commander. "You're no Navy pilot," he observed. "No commissar, no uniform I recognize." His hand rested on his holstered bolt pistol. "So, what are you, Luke Skywalker, and how did you come by an Imperial shuttle?" Before Luke could answer, the perimeter alarms blared. Tech Priest V's augment eye swiveled toward the northern quadrant. Xenos bioforms approaching, multiple genetic strains, estimated time to breach 3 minutes. Kell's expression hardened. "We'll continue this discussion later, stranger. For now, if you can fight, we welcome your lasgun. If not, stay out of the way." He turned to his troops, to your positions, Forcadia and the Emperor. Luke ignited his lightsaber, the emerald blade humming to life. The guardsmen recoiled, several making warding signs against witchcraft. "I can fight," Luke said simply. Kell stared at the energy blade, then at Luke's calm expression. After a moment's calculation, the colonel nodded. "Throne knows we need all the help we can get, witch or not. Try to keep up." The defenders of Kappa 119 moved with the efficiency of those long accustomed to combat. Gun crews manned heavy weapons positions while infantry squads deployed in overlapping fields of fire. A handful of survivors from the Adeptus Mechanicus tended to auto-turrets and defense systems, chanting binary prayers to coax maximum performance from the overtaxed machines. Luke took position near a barricade of twisted metal and rockcrete, observing the approaching threat. Through the Force, he sensed the tyrannid organisms as a disturbing void, a hunger without consciousness as humans understood it. They moved with single-minded purpose, guided by a greater intelligence that regarded the defenders as nothing more than biomass to be consumed. The first wave broke against the Imperial lines like a tide of Catan and claw. Gaunts, hundreds of them, scrambling over the uneven terrain with uncanny speed. Heavy bolters chattered, cutting sways through the Xenos ranks, while Lasguns fired in disciplined volleys that burned alien flesh to ash. Yet for each creature that fell, 3 more took its place. Luke watched, appalled, as the wave of alien organisms crashed against the human defences. When a section of barricade began to buckle under the onslaught, he moved. The Force flowed through him, enhancing his speed as he crossed the battlefield in a blur. His lightsaber carved through tyrannid carapace with impossible ease, the blade cauterizing flesh even as it severed limbs and heads. A massive creature larger than the others and armoured with thickened plates burst through the defensive line. Its thing talons cut down 3 guardsmen before they could react. Luke felt their deaths in the Force. Bright lights extinguished in an instant. Anger threatened to rise, but he released it into the Force as he had been taught. Luke leapt, somersaulting over the tyrannid warrior, his blade describing a perfect arc that separated the creature's head from its shoulders. He landed amidst a group of smaller gaunts, the Force guiding his movements as he dispatched them with economic precision. From his command position, Colonel Kell watched the stranger move with inhuman grace, the glowing sword cutting through Xenos that had shrugged off Las gunfire. "Emperor, protect us," he whispered, uncertain whether to be grateful for the assistance or terrified of the power on display. The tyrannid assault intensified as larger bioforms joined the fray. Acarnif effects, tank-sized and bristling with bioweapons, lumbered toward the weakened section of the perimeter. The Scannons tracked it, beams of coherent light scorching its armoured hide, but failing to penetrate the thickest plates. Luke felt the creature's approach through the Force, sensed the danger it represented to the beleaguered defenders. He centered himself, remembering Yoda's teachings about size mattering not. The Force flowed through him as he extended his hand toward a damaged mining excavator, its mass many times that of an X-Wing fighter. The massive machine rose into the air, straining power cables snapping free. Imperial guardsmen gaped in disbelief as Luke, eyes closed in concentration, directed the improvised projectile toward the advancing Carnif effects. The excavator struck with devastating force, crushing the tyrannid bio-titan beneath its weight. In the momentary lull that followed, Luke sensed a shift in the alien presence. The attacking organisms began to retreat, not in defeat, but as if responding to new instructions from the controlling intelligence. Something had changed. The Force whispered a warning of danger far greater than the physical threat they had just repelled. Colonel Kell approached, his expression a mixture of awe and suspicion. "What manner of psyker are you?" he demanded. "No sanctioned witch I've encountered wields power like that." "I'm not a psyker," Luke replied, deactivating his lightsaber. "I'm a Jedi Knight. Where I come from, we're peacekeepers, not weapons." Kell laughed bitterly. "Peace in this galaxy. You truly aren't from around here." He holstered his pistol. "Whatever you are, you've bought us a few more hours of survival. The Emperor protects, even through strange instruments." The survivors regrouped within the central command bunker, tending to wounds and repairing equipment as best they could with dwindling supplies. Luke assisted where he could, using the Force to lift heavy objects, and in a few cases to accelerate healing for the most critically wounded. Each demonstration of his strange power earned him weary glances and whispered prayers from the guardsmen, but also grudging acceptance. In a war for survival, any advantage was welcome, regardless of its source. Tech Priest V approached Luke as he helped reset a broken bone in a young trooper's arm. The Tech Priest's mechandrites writhed with what might have been agitation or curiosity. "Your energy weapon," V said, his voice a blend of organic and synthetic components. "It operates on principles unknown to the Mechanicus. I would examine it in the name of the Omnissiah." Luke finished his work with the injured soldier before answering. "My lightsaber is more than a weapon," he explained. "It's part of who I am as a Jedi. The crystal within resonates with the Force." Force V repeated the word, triggering search protocols in his augmented brain. No matching reference in the Lexicanum Imperialis. "Explain this phenomenon." Luke considered how to describe something so fundamental to someone who had never experienced it. The Force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. A Jedi can feel it, channel it, use it to defend and protect. V's optical sensors pulsed as he recorded the information. This description bears superficial similarity to theoretical constructs of the Immaterium, yet lacks correlation with known warp phenomena. A mechadendrite extended toward Luke's lightsaber. The machine spirit of your weapon. How is it appeased? Luke smiled, finding something almost endearing in the tech priest's clinical curiosity. There is no machine spirit as you understand it. The kyber crystal within resonates with the Force and with me. It's a connection, not a submission. This concept clearly disturbed Val, whose doctrines allowed for no technology outside the teachings of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Before the conversation could continue, Colonel Kell summoned them to the command center. Gathered around a holothic table displaying the moon's surface, the surviving officers of Kappa 119 presented a grim picture of their situation. Tyranid bioships maintained orbital superiority, preventing escape or reinforcement. Ground forces had established multiple hive clusters that continuously spawned new organisms, and most concerning OPEX readings indicated the approach of a Norn queen, a massive creature capable of accelerating the invasion exponentially. We have perhaps 2 days before the main hive fleet arrives, Kell concluded. Our astropathic distress call received no response. We must assume the Imperium has written off this system. A heavy silence fell over the command center. These were soldiers of the Imperium, prepared to die for their Emperor, but none wished for a futile death that would serve no purpose beyond feeding the endless hunger of the Tyranid swarm. Luke studied the tactical display, the Force providing insights beyond what the technology revealed. He sensed patterns in the Xenos movements, purpose behind their seemingly mindless advance. They're adapting, he observed, learning from each encounter, testing our defenses to find weaknesses. Kell nodded grimly. The hive mind learns quickly. Each assault is more targeted than the last. Luke pointed to a formation near the equatorial region. What's this structure? It doesn't match the others. Tech Priest V adjusted the display, enhancing the area in question. Capillary Tower, primary synaptic relay for the hive mind in this region. It coordinates the lesser organisms within its psychic radius. A command center, Luke translated, cut it off, and the creatures lose direction. Kell shook his head. We've considered assaulting the capillary towers, but previous attempts failed. The concentration of defender organisms is too great, and the towers themselves are heavily armored against conventional weapons. Luke considered the problem, reaching out through the Force to sense the nature of these alien constructs. The Tyranid presence registered as a psychic void, a hunger without conscience that consumed all it touched. Yet within that void, he detected structure, patterns of energy that might be vulnerable to disruption. I may be able to help, he said finally. The Force can affect these creatures, interfere with their connection to this hive mind. If I can reach the capillary tower, I might be able to disrupt it long enough for your weapons to destroy it. Kell studied Luke with the calculating gaze of a commander who had sent too many soldiers to their deaths. Even if we mounted an assault to get you there, what makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? Luke activated his lightsaber, the emerald blade humming with power. This weapon can cut through their armor, and the Force will guide my actions. After hours of debate and planning, a desperate strategy emerged. The remaining heavy weapons would mount a diversionary attack on the Tyranid perimeter, drawing defender organisms away from the capillary tower. Meanwhile, Luke would lead a small strike team through a maintenance tunnel that mining surveys suggested might bypass the heaviest concentrations of Xenos. As the defenders prepared for what many believed would be their final mission, Colonel Kell took Luke aside. You don't owe us anything, Skywalker, he said, his voice low. You could take the remaining shuttle, try to break through the blockade. One craft might slip past where a larger evacuation would fail. Luke sensed the genuine concern behind the offer, the unexpected mercy from a man who had likely shown little throughout a lifetime of war. I was brought to this galaxy for a reason, Luke replied. I believe this is part of it. The Force led me here. To you and your people. I won't abandon you now. Kell's weathered face revealed a flicker of emotion quickly suppressed. The Emperor protects, he said, the words carrying the weight of ritual and genuine faith. though I suspect your force and his will may not be so different in purpose. The assault began at what passed for dawn on the airless moon. Heavy weapons opened fire on the Tyrannid perimeter, the distinctive sound of Autok cannons and the sizzle of Lascanons echoing across the barren landscape. As predicted, the Xenos responded with overwhelming force, bioforms pouring from hidden tunnel networks to counter the perceived threat. Luke, leading a squad of 5 volunteers, slipped into the maintenance access that would hopefully bypass the Tyrannid defences. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for a man in Carapace armour to navigate, its walls lined with corroded pipes and bundled cables. Emergency lumens cast everything in a sickly green glow that reminded Luke uncomfortably of the Death Star's interior. 2 km to the primary junction, whispered Sergeant Thorne, the squad leader whose knowledge of the mining complex had made the mission possible. From there, another kilometre to the emergence point nearest the capillary tower. Luke nodded, stretching out with his feelings to detect any threats ahead. The force rippled with warning. "We're not alone down here," he cautioned. "Something is moving through the tunnel, something big." The squad tensed, weapons trained on the darkness ahead. For several minutes they heard nothing but the distant rumble of the diversionary battle and the hiss of air cyclers in their rebreather masks. Then a sound like wet leather being dragged across metal, growing louder with each passing second. Licked her. Thorne breathed, the word carrying with it a dread that Luke felt ripple through the squad. "Throne, preserve us." Before Luke could ask for clarification, the creature struck from above, camouflaged skin rippling as it dropped from a maintenance shaft. A tuft of muscle, claw, and fang, adapted specifically for ambush predation. Its sting talons lashed out, impaling the rearmost guardsman before anyone could react. Luke ignited his lightsaber, the green glow illuminating the nightmare creature as it withdrew into the shadows, dragging its victim with it. The remaining guardsmen fired their lasguns in panicked bursts, last bolts ricocheting off metal walls and barely missing their companions. "Hold your fire," Luke commanded, his voice cutting through their fear. "It's trying to separate us. Stay together." The tunnel fell silent again, save for the ragged breathing of terrified men. Luke closed his eyes, reaching out through the force to locate the predator. Unlike the mindless hunger of the lesser organisms, this creature possessed a cold, calculating intelligence focused entirely on the hunt. There, moving through a parallel axeway, preparing for another strike, Luke sensed its intent seconds before it burst through a ventilation grate. Talons aimed for Sergeant Thorne's back. Luke's lightsaber intercepted the attack, slicing through one talon and scoring the creature's carapace. The lictor recoiled, hissing in pain or surprise, its chameleonic skin failing to adapt to the unfamiliar weapon. For a moment, predator and prey assessed each other, the lictor's sensory organs tasting the air, analysing the threat. Then it charged again, moving with shocking speed in the confined space. Luke met its attack with Jedi precision, the force guiding his movements as he parried talons and slashing limbs. The lightsaber carved glowing furrows in the creature's armour, the smell of burning alien flesh filling the tunnel. Wounded but undeterred, the lictor changed tactics. It retreated a few paces, then spat a glob of paralytic toxin toward the guardsman. Luke sensed the danger and raised his hand, telekinetically diverting the toxic spray into a side passage. The momentary distraction was all the creature needed to lunge forward, its remaining talon driving toward Luke's chest. Luke sidestepped with Jedi reflexes, but in the narrow confines of the tunnel could not avoid the attack entirely. The talon scored his side, tearing through his flight suit and drawing blood. Pain lanced through him, accompanied by a burning sensation as alien toxins entered his system. Channeling the force to suppress the poison's effects, Luke pivoted and brought his lightsaber down in a two-handed strike that severed the Lars' primary attack limb. The creature thrashed in agony, acidic blood spattering the walls. A coordinated volley of lasgun fire from the remaining guardsmen finally brought it down, the concentrated energy burning through its weakened carapace and into the vital organs beneath. Luke leaned against the tunnel wall, using the force to accelerate his body's natural healing processes. The wound was painful, but not life-threatening, provided the alien toxins could be neutralized. "Throne of Terror," one of the guardsmen whispered, staring at the smoking corpse of the lair. "I've never seen anyone fight one of those things in close quarters and live." Sergeant Thorne approached Luke, offering a field dressing from his combat kit. "The tunnel junction is just ahead. We need to keep moving. That thing might have alerted others to our presence." Luke accepted the dressing, applying it to his wound before nodding his agreement. They proceeded deeper into the tunnel network, more cautious now, aware that the Tyranids had adapted to use the human-made passages for their own purposes. When they finally reached the emergence point, they found themselves in what had once been a processing facility for extracted minerals. Now it was a nightmare landscape of organic corruption, the metal and concrete of Imperial architecture overgrown with pulsing membranous tissue that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Through a shattered viewport they could see their target. The capillary tower rose from the centre of the Xenos infestation, a massive structure of bone and chitin that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. Around its base swarmed hundreds of defender organisms, from tiny rippers that consumed everything in their path to massive guard beasts that watched the perimeter with compound eyes. Emperor's Mercy breathed one of the men guardsmen. How are we supposed to get through that? Luke studied the scene, reaching out through the Force to sense the patterns of energy flowing through the alien structure. The capillary tower was more than a physical construct. It was a psychic amplifier channeling the will of the distant hive mind to the organisms on this moon, and like any energy pattern, it could be disrupted. "I need to get closer," Luke said, "close enough to affect the tower directly." Sergeant Thorne pointed to a secondary structure adjacent to the main tower. "Feeder tendrils. They collect biomass from processing pools and transport it to the tower. If we can reach that access point, you'd be within 100 men. Luke nodded. "That's close enough, but we'll need a distraction." The plan came together quickly, born of desperation and the knowledge that none of them expected to survive this mission. The guardsmen would use their remaining demolition charges to destroy the processing pools, creating a diversion that would draw defender organisms away from the tower. Meanwhile, Luke would approach the tower alone, using the Force to conceal his presence until he was close enough to strike. As final preparations were made, Sergeant Thorne handed Luke a compact device with a single red activation rune. "Melter bomb," he explained, "designed to take out armoured vehicles. Should be enough to destroy the tower once you've weakened it." Luke accepted the weapon, securing it to his belt alongside his lightsaber. "May the Force be with you all," he said. Thorne nodded solemnly. "The Emperor protects Skywalker, though I suspect he has a special path for you." He extended his hand, a gesture of respect between warriors. "It has been an honour." Luke clasped the offered hand, sensing the courage and resignation in the man before him. These soldiers expected to die here, yet faced that fate with a dignity that moved him deeply. "The honour is mine, Sergeant." The diversion began with the thunder of explosives tearing through the biomass processing pools. Tyranid defender organisms reacted immediately, converging on the source of the disturbance with single-minded purpose. Lasgun fire cut through the smaller creatures as the guardsmen made their stand, buying time with their lives. Luke moved through the chaos with Force-enhanced speed, his presence in the psychic landscape minimized through techniques he had learned from Yoda. To the alien consciousness that directed the swarm, he was a ghost, barely registering amid the more immediate threat to its feeding grounds. He reached the base of the capillary tower undetected, the massive structure looming above him like a grotesque parody of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Up close, he could see that what appeared to be solid matter was in fact a complex latticework of living tissue pulsing with fluids and electrical impulses that carried the hive mind's commands. Luke ignited his lightsaber, its emerald light stark against the organic corruption surrounding him. With Jedi precision, he began cutting through the outer layer of the tower, carving away the protective chitin to expose the more vulnerable synaptic tissues beneath. The tower reacted to the assault, defensive mechanisms activating as pain signals reached the controlling intelligence. Spore sacs burst, releasing clouds of microscopic organisms designed to attack foreign bodies. Luke held his breath, using the Force to create a barrier around himself. As he continued his work deeper into the structure, he encountered resistance of a different kind. The psychic presence of the hive mind, previously distant and alien, now focused directly upon him. It probed his consciousness, incomprehensible in its vastness, yet undeniably malevolent in its intent. Luke's mental shields, honed through years of Jedi training, strained against the intrusion. This was not like the dark side as he had known it, not the seductive whispers of power that had tempted his father. This was consumption without conscience, a hunger that would devour his very identity and leave nothing behind. He pushed back, channeling the light side of the Force in a wave of purifying energy that disrupted the synaptic pathways around him. The tower shuddered, its bioluminescence flickering as connections to the hive mind temporarily failed. Luke seized the opportunity, driving his lightsaber into the heart of the structure, where the densest cluster of synaptic tissues pulsed with alien life. The blade sank to its hilt, super-hot plasma burning through organic matter designed to resist conventional weapons. The tower's death throes registered as a psychic scream that echoed across the moon. Throughout the Tyranid swarm, lesser organisms faltered, their actions suddenly uncoordinated as the controlling intelligence lost its primary relay. Some turned on each other in confusion, while others simply collapsed, their autonomous functions insufficient to maintain life without the hive mind's constant direction. Luke withdrew his weapon and placed the melter bomb within the wound he had created. As he retreated to a safe distance, he saw Tyranid warrior forms converging on his position, their movements jerky but purposeful, driven by autonomous defensive protocols rather than central command. The melter bomb detonated in a blinding flash of heat and light. The capillary tower, its structure already compromised by Luke's lightsaber, collapsed in on itself, secondary explosions rippling through its length as volatile biocompounds ignited. The surrounding defender organisms writhed in what might have been agony as the psychic backlash of the tower's destruction washed over them. Luke made his way back toward the processing facility, hoping to rendezvous with any surviving guardsmen. The scene that greeted him was one of carnage. Bodies, human and Xenos alike, littered the ground in testament to the ferocity of the battle that had raged during his assault on the tower. Among the dead, he found Sergeant Thorne, the man's lasgun still clutched in lifeless hands, his face set in a final expression of defiance. Of the squad that had accompanied them, there was no sign. Luke knelt beside the fallen sergeant, feeling each death as a ripple in the force. They had given everything for a chance, however slim, at survival. He would ensure their sacrifice was not in vain. The journey back to the mining outpost was arduous, made more challenging by the wound in his side and the lingering effects of the Tyranid toxins. Several times he encountered groups of Xenos organisms now acting independently without the tower's guidance. Some attacked on sight while others seemed confused, their behaviour patterns broken by the loss of the hive mind's constant input. When Luke finally reached the perimeter defences of Kappa 119, he found them in a state of heightened alert. A new threat had emerged during his absence, one potentially more dangerous than the Tyranid swarm. Colonel Kell met him at the command bunker, the man's expression grave. Despite the apparent success of the mission, the tower fell. "We've registered a 60% decrease in coordinated Xenos activity. You succeeded, Skywalker." But Luke prompted, sensing the unspoken concern, Kell activated the Command Sense main view screen, displaying an orbital scan of the system. Black ship. It entered orbit during the assault. They're coming for you. The distinctive silhouette of an inquisitorial vessel hung in low orbit, its design unmistakable to anyone familiar with Imperial iconography. Even as they watched, smaller craft detached from its hull, descending toward the mining outpost. "You need to leave," Kell urged. "The Inquisition doesn't ask questions. They'll take you aboard that ship and you'll never be seen again." Luke considered his options. He had felt the presence aboard that vessel even before seeing it. Minds shielded and focused, hunting among them, a void in the Force, an absence that reminded him uncomfortably of the Salamiri of Merca. "There's nowhere to run," he said finally, "and I won't put your people at further risk by making them harbour a fugitive from the Inquisition." Kell's expression hardened. "After what you did for us, we'd die before handing you over." Luke placed a hand on the Colonel's shoulder. "Then I won't ask that of you. This is my path to walk. The Force will guide me." The inquisitorial lander touched down on the primary landing pad, its black hull emblazoned with the symbol of the Ordo Xenos. From its ramp descended a procession that seemed designed to inspire terror. Sisters of Silence, their armour ornate yet functional, their presence dampening the very force around them. Stormtroopers of the Inquisition, hellguns primed and ready. And at their centre the tall austere figure of Inquisitor Mathis Rowe. Luke stepped forward to meet them, lightsaber held loosely at his side but not ignited. He showed no fear, no anger, only a calm acceptance that impressed even the veterans of the Imperial Guard who watched from defensive positions. Luke Skywalker, Inquisitor Rowe, stated, his voice carrying across the landing pad without apparent effort, "I am Inquisitor Mathis Rowe of the Ordo Xenos. By the authority vested in me by the God Emperor of mankind, I am here to take you into custody." Luke inclined his head slightly. "I understand, but first, I would ask that you acknowledge what these soldiers have accomplished here. They've struck a significant blow against the Tyranid invasion. They deserve recognition, not abandonment." Rowe studied Luke with cold calculation, his augmentatic eye whirring as it recorded and analysed. "Their service will be noted. Reinforcements have already been dispatched to secure this moon, now that the Xenos threat has been temporarily disrupted." A murmur ran through the watching guardsmen. They had expected to die here, abandoned by the Imperium they served. That they might survive seemed almost impossible to comprehend. "You did this," Rowe continued, focusing on Luke. "The destruction of the capillary tower. An impressive feat, even for one with your unique abilities." Luke made no response, but his silence was confirmation enough. "The question remains," Rowe said. "What exactly are you, Luke Skywalker? No sanctioned psycho wields power as you do. No known Xenos matches your genetic profile. You appeared from the warp, yet bear none of its corruption." "I've answered these questions before," Luke replied evenly. "I am a Jedi Knight. I come from a galaxy beyond yours. I was brought here for a purpose, though I'm still discovering what that might be." Rose's expression remained impassive. "The Imperium has encountered many who claim divine purpose. Skywalker most proved false. Those few who were genuine often represented the greatest threats to humanity." Luke sensed the tension building around them, the Sisters of Silence moving to establish a perimeter, their null auras creating dead zones in the Force. The stormtroopers adjusted their positions, creating overlapping fields of fire. They expected resistance. "I won't fight you," Luke said, reading their intentions. "But before I surrender myself, I ask one thing. That you help these people. They've fought bravely against impossible odds. They deserve better than to be forgotten." Rowe considered this request, then nodded once. "The survivors of Kappa 19 will be evacuated and reassigned. Their service will be acknowledged in the annals of the Ordo Xenos." It was a cold comfort, but better than the death sentence they had faced before Luke's arrival. The Jedi sensed relief rippling through the assembled guardsmen, mingled with concern for his fate. Luke stepped forward, presenting his lightsaber hilt first to the Inquisitor. "A gesture of good faith," he explained. Rowe accepted the weapon cautiously, his augment eye scanning its construction. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The energy signatures match no known technology in Imperial records. It's a Jedi's weapon," Luke said. "A lightsaber more than a tool. It's a symbol of what we stand for. Peace, justice, harmony with the Force." The Inquisitor's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "Peace is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford. Skywalker, justice is measured in blood and fire. As for harmony, there is only the Emperor's will." He gestured, and the Sisters of Silence moved to flank Luke. "You will come with us. The Inquisition has many questions, and you will provide answers." Luke allowed himself to be led toward the waiting shuttle, the Sisters' null auras creating a disconcerting void around him. The Force remained present, but distant, like a voice heard through thick glass. It was disorienting but not debilitating. Unlike many psychers, Luke's abilities were not solely dependent on external energies. His connection to the Force came as much from within as without. As they prepared to board, Colonel Kell approached, stopping at the perimeter established by the stormtroopers. "Inquisitor," he called, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had faced death too many times to fear it. "This man saved my command when the Imperium had abandoned us. Whatever else he may be, he has served the Emperor's will in deed, if not in name." Rowe turned, studying the Colonel with clinical detachment. "Your statement is noted, Colonel. The Inquisition takes all factors into consideration when rendering judgment." Luke caught Kell's eye and nodded slightly, a silent message of gratitude and reassurance. Then he was escorted into the shuttle, the ramp closing behind him like the ceiling of a tomb. The journey to the black ship passed in silence. Luke seated among the Sisters of Silence, their presence a constant reminder of the Imperium's methods for dealing with those who wielded powers beyond the ordinary. Through viewports he watched as the ruined mining outpost receded, then the barren moon itself until they approached the looming mass of the inquisitorial vessel. The black ship's interior matched its external appearance, all Gothic grandeur married to brutal functionality. Corridors of black stone were lined with cells designed to contain psychers, each door marked with wards and sigils of containment. The air hummed with the presence of null field generators and psi dampeners, creating an environment where even the strongest witch would find their powers diminished. Luke was brought to an interrogation chamber deep within the ship. Unlike the crude facilities of the Imperial Navy vessel, where he had first been questioned, this room was equipped with technologies specifically designed to analyze, contain, and if necessary, eliminate psychic threats. Inquisitor Rowe awaited him, seated behind a desk of polished obsidian, Luke's lightsaber placed prominently before him. "Be seated," Rowe instructed, indicating a chair of bare metal positioned in the center of a circular array of null rods. Luke complied, feeling the force grow more distant as the null field activated fully, not gone, but muted, requiring greater concentration to access. "I will be direct, Skywalker," Rowe began. "Your arrival has created ripples that extend beyond a single system. The entity you encountered aboard the Luminous Judgment, this Chaos Sorcerer, has been tracking you since your emergence. His master, a demon prince of considerable power, and has taken a personal interest in your existence." Luke listened calmly, unsurprised that the dark forces he had briefly encountered would maintain their pursuit. "Furthermore," Rowe continued, "the Xenos threat you helped combat has demonstrated unusual adaptation patterns in response to your abilities. The hive mind has allocated significant resources to this system, far beyond what would be expected for a minor mining outpost." "They sensed something different," Luke suggested. "A power they hadn't encountered before." Rowe nodded slightly. "Indeed, which brings us to the central question. What exactly is this force you command? How does it differ from the psychic energies we know as the warp?" Luke considered how to explain concepts fundamental to his understanding of reality to someone whose frame of reference was so radically different. "The force is an energy field created by all living things." He began using the same words he had shared with the tech priest. "It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. In my reality, those sensitive to the force can learn to feel its currents, to channel it, to become instruments of its will. And this will," Rowe probed, "what directs it? What purpose does it serve?" "The force itself seeks balance," Luke explained. "But it has aspects, what we call the light side and the dark side. The light flows from peace, knowledge, serenity. The dark from passion, strength, power. A Jedi serves the light, seeks harmony rather than dominance." Rose's expression remained neutral, but Luke sensed his skepticism even through the null field. In the Imperium's experience, such distinctions are meaningless. All psychic power flows from the warp, a realm of chaos and madness inhabited by entities that seek only to corrupt and consume. "I've felt those entities," Luke acknowledged, "when I first arrived and again when facing the Chaos Sorcerer. There's a similarity to what we call the dark side, but more absolute, more corrupting." The Inquisitor leaned forward slightly. "Yet you claim immunity from this corruption." "Not immunity," Luke corrected. "No one is immune to the dark side, but resistance. Yes, the disciplines of the Jedi provide protection against darkness, both external and internal." Rowe made a steeple gesture with his fingers. A fascinating claim, one that must be tested, of course. Before Luke could respond, the interrogation chamber's lighting shifted. Bathing everything in a red glow that reminded him uncomfortably of the Emperor's throne, the room aboard the second Death Star. From hidden vox emitters came a sound just beyond the range of comfortable hearing, a dissonant chord that seemed to burrow into the mind. Luke recognized the technique not so different from the mind-influencing methods used by Imperial interrogators in his own galaxy. He centered himself, allowing the discomfort to flow through him without taking hold. "Impressive," Rowe noted after several minutes. "Most psychers would be experiencing significant mental distress by now." The lights returned to normal, the sound fading. Rowe made a notation on a data slate before continuing. "The Imperium has protocols for dealing with psychic individuals. Skywalker. Those deemed stable and loyal are sanctioned, bound to the Emperor's service. Those who present unacceptable risk are dealt with accordingly." "And which category have you placed me in?" Luke asked, though he suspected the answer. "Neither," Rowe Rappel replied. "You represent something outside our existing classification, a potential asset, but also a potential threat of the highest order." The Inquisitor rose, circling the desk to stand directly before Luke. "I have been authorized to offer you a choice. Serve the Imperium directly under my supervision. Your abilities would be valuable in our war against the enemies of mankind. or face containment in a null chamber until we determine whether you can be safely returned to wherever you originated. Luke met the Inquisitor's gaze steadily. What would this service entail? The Ordo Xenos combats alien threats to humanity. Your demonstrated effectiveness against the Tyrannid organism suggests you would be particularly useful in this capacity. And if these missions conflict with the principles I follow as a Jedi— Rose's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. The Emperor's will supersedes all other concerns, Skywalker. If you cannot accept this fundamental truth, you are not fit for service. Luke considered the offer carefully. Containment would severely limit his ability to understand this galaxy, to find his purpose here. Yet service to an Imperium whose methods ran counter to everything he believed would be a compromise he could not easily make. Before he could respond, a shudder ran through the black ship. Alert klaxons blared as the deck plates vibrated beneath their feet. Rose's hand moved to a communication device at his collar. "Report," he commanded. A static-filled voice responded. "Warp disturbance, Lord. Massive energy spike. Something's coming through." The Inquisitor's expression darkened. "Seal all containment chambers. Activate void shields at maximum capacity." Prepare for his orders were cut short as reality itself seemed to tear open within the interrogation chamber. A rift appeared, spilling impossible colours and whispering voices that promised both ecstasy and agony. From this wound in space stepped the robed figure Luke had faced aboard the luminous judgment, now accompanied by something far worse. Magister Vul, his form now further twisted by demonic favour, bowed with mocking deference. "Inquisitor Rowe," he greeted. "My master has been most eager to meet the anomaly you've been keeping from us." Behind him loomed a figure that defied mortal comprehension. 9SF tall, with skin like burnished copper, etched with glowing symbols of power. Forearms ended in hands that constantly shifted form from talon claws to delicate fingers, and back again. Its face was a beautiful mask, split by a smile too wide for human features, eyes swirling with the colours of the warp. "I am Zarakanel," the Daemon Prince announced, its voice simultaneously a seductive whisper and a deafening roar. "Herald of Slanesh, keeper of forbidden pleasures, and you, Luke Skywalker, have caught my interest." Inquisitor Rowe had drawn a force sword, its power field crackling to life as he interposed himself between the demonic entity and Luke. "In the Emperor's name, I banish thee," he intoned, activating a wrist-mounted device that projected a field of sanctified energy. Zara Kanel laughed, the sound sending ripples of distortion through the chamber's structure. "Your Emperor is a corpse god, little Inquisitor. His power wanes while ours ascends." A casual gesture from the Daemon Prince sent Rowe flying across the room to crash into the far wall, his protective field shattered by the psychic impact. The null rods surrounding Luke sparked and died as warp energy overwhelmed their containment capacity. Luke felt the force return in a rush, no longer dampened by Imperial technology. He reached out telekinetically, calling his lightsaber from the desk where it lay. The weapon flew to his hand, igniting as his fingers closed around the familiar hilt. "Ah," Zarakanel purred, eyes fixed on the emerald blade. "The weapon of your order, so similar to those wielded by my champions, yet fueled by such different energies. Fascinating." Luke took a defensive stance, the force flowing through him, warning of imminent danger. He could feel the corruption emanating from the Daemon Prince, a psychic miasma that threatened to cloud his thoughts with promises of power and pleasure beyond mortal experience. "Your offers don't interest me," Luke stated firmly. "I've faced the dark side before. I won't be seduced by your promises." Zara Kanel tilted its too beautiful head, expression curious. "The dark side. How quaint. What you call darkness is merely one facet of the infinite spectrum of sensation I offer. Why limit yourself to such binary thinking when the multiverse contains endless gradations of experience?" The Daemon Prince extended one hand, reality warping around its fingers. "I could show you worlds beyond your comprehension, Skywalker. I could reunite you with those you have lost. Your father, your mentor, even that sister you left behind." Luke felt the force tremble as the creature spoke of Leia. Somehow plucking that knowledge from either his mind or the fabric of reality itself, he reinforced his mental shields, remembering Yoda's teachings about resisting temptation. "What you offer is illusion," Luke replied, "built on suffering and corruption. I've seen the cost of your gifts in the eyes of your followers." Mr. V stepped forward, his once human features now an unsettling blend of beauty and horror. "The Jedi speaks of costs," he sneered. "As if your Imperium does not exact its own terrible price. How many billions die for your corpse emperor each day? At least our gods reward their servants with power and transformation." From the corner where he had fallen, Inquisitor Rowe struggled to his knees, blood streaming from his nose and ears. "Silence, de Monthther," he spat. "Your honeyed lies poisoned the air itself." Zarakanel gestured lazily, and the Inquisitor froze in place, paralyzed by warp energy that coiled around him like glowing chains. "Patience, little Inquisitor. You will have your turn to scream." The demon's attention returned to Luke. "Now, where were we?" "Ah, yes. Your reluctance to embrace a greater truth." The chamber around them began to shift, walls melting and reforming into organic patterns that pulsed with unnatural life. The temperature fluctuated wildly, from burning heat to bone-chilling cold in seconds. Reality itself seemed to bow to the Demon Prince's will. Impressive, Luke acknowledged, maintaining his center despite the chaos surrounding him. But the Force cannot be manipulated by mere illusion. Zarakanel's smile widened impossibly. "This is no illusion, Jedi. This is the true nature of reality. When the barriers between dimensions grow thin, your Force, our warp, the immaterium and materium, all branches of the same cosmic tree. I have existed for 10,000 years. I have witnessed the birth and death of stars. I have tasted the souls of heroes and gods. What are you compared to such experience?" The Demon Prince raised all four arms, warp energy gathering between them in a swirling vortex of impossible colours. "Enough talk. If you will not be swayed by wisdom, perhaps pain will prove more persuasive." The energy lashed out in tendrils of corrupting power, seeking to envelop Luke in a cocoon of agony. Luke raised his lightsaber to intercept the attack, the blade parting the warp energy, but not without cost. Where the corruption touched the lightsaber's plasma, it sparked and hissed, the kyber crystal at its heart, resonating with dangerous harmonics. Luke felt the strain through his connection to the weapon, sensing that prolonged contact with this energy might damage or corrupt the crystal itself. He altered his stance, using the blade to deflect rather than directly block, allowing the Force to guide his movements with perfect efficiency. Zarakanel watched with growing interest. "Your weapon resists corruption better than most. Another fascinating property to study when you are broken to my will." The Demon Prince gestured to Magister Vorwell, who withdrew a curved blade that pulsed with the same corrupt energy. The sorcerer advanced on Luke, his movements unnaturally fluid, as if his joints operated on principles different from human anatomy. "I will taste the essence of your power," V hissed, blade raised. Luke met the attack with precision, his lightsaber clashing against the warp-forged weapon. Where they connected, reality itself seemed to scream, the conflicting energies creating ripples in the fabric of space-time. The sorcerer pressed his attack, each strike leaving trails of corrupting energy that lingered in the air like toxic smoke. As they duelled across the shifting landscape of the chamber, Luke sensed something through the Force, a presence approaching rapidly through the corridors of the Black Ship. Multiple presences, disciplined minds united in purpose, and among them the distinct absence that signified the Sisters of Silence. Zarakanel sensed them too, its perfect features contorting with annoyance. "It seems our private audience is to be interrupted," the Demon Prince observed. "No matter. My servants can entertain the Emperor's lapdogs while we continue our discussion." With a gesture, the rift behind the daemon widened, disgorging a dozen Chaos Space Marines in the ornate armour of the Emperor's Children Traitor Legion. Their once proud Syriamite was now festooned with horrific trophies and symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon directly. "Kill everything that approaches," Zarakanel commanded. "Bring me their skulls as offerings." The corrupted Astartes moved with predatory grace toward the Shamer's entrance, bolters and warp-tainted blades ready. Luke knew that even the disciplined forces of the Inquisition would struggle against such opponents. He had to end this quickly. Pushing Vowel back with a flurry of attacks, Luke created space between them. Then, drawing deeply on the Force, he directed a telekinetic push not at his opponents, but at the deck beneath their feet. The already weakened structure, compromised by warp energies, gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. Voril stumbled as the floor collapsed beneath him, falling through to the level below. The sudden structural failure created a cascading effect, alarms blaring throughout the ship as compartments depressurized an emergency bulkhead slammed into place. Zarakanel remained floating above the devastation, unaffected by mortal concerns such as gravity or atmosphere. Clever, the Daemon Prince acknowledged, but ultimately futile. There is nowhere aboard this vessel you can hide from me. Luke knew the entity spoke truth. The confined space of the black ship offered limited options against a being that could warp reality itself. He needed a different approach. Meeting Zarakanel's gaze directly, Luke deactivated his lightsaber. The emerald blade retracted with its distinctive hiss, leaving him seemingly defenseless before the Daemon Prince. "Surrendering already?" Zarakel asked, skepticism evident in its multi-toned voice. "No," Luke replied calmly, "offering you a challenge." He raised his mechanical right hand, a reminder of his own past confrontation with darkness. "You claim to know me, to understand my weaknesses and desires. Prove it. Face me directly, mind to mind. If your will is truly as powerful as you claim, you should have nothing to fear from a single mortal." The Daemon Prince's expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession, settling finally on amused interest. A psychic duel? How quaint. It has been centuries since a mortal offered me such entertainment. Zarakanel descended until it hovered just above the ruined deck, its perfect face inches from Luke's. "Very well, Jedi. Let us see what secrets your mind holds." The physical world seemed to recede as Zarakanel's consciousness crashed against Luke's mental barriers like a tidal wave of sensation and impossible knowledge. Images flooded through Luke's awareness, experiences no human was meant to comprehend. Atrocities committed across 10,000 years of existence. Luke anchored himself in the Force, allowing it to flow through him, neither resisting the onslaught directly nor allowing it to overwhelm him. The light side responded to his call, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a clear pool in which the daemon's corrupting influence could be contained and examined without risk of contamination. Zarakanel's mental assault faltered momentarily, the entity surprised by the nature of Luke's defense. Interesting. Its voice echoed through the psychic landscape. "You do not fight as the psychers of this reality do. Your power does not draw from the warp, yet accomplishes similar effects." The Daemon Prince redoubled its efforts, probing for weaknesses in Luke's mental fortress. It found memories of Vader, of the Emperor, of Luke's own brushes with the dark side. It sought to exploit these vulnerabilities, to twist them into weapons against their owner. "Your father felt darkness," Zarakanel whispered. "The shadow lurks in your blood as well. Why resist what is your birthright?" In response, Luke opened himself further to the light, allowing the Force to illuminate the darkest corners of his own psyche. He acknowledged his fears, his anger, his potential for darkness, but refused to be defined by them. "You misunderstand the nature of the Force," Luke replied, within the psychic battlefield. "Balance is not found in surrendering to darkness, but in acknowledging it while choosing the light." As they struggled in this mental arena, Luke sensed Zarakanel attempting to corrupt the very Force around them, to twist its currents toward darkness. The Daemon Prince wielded powers accumulated over millennia of existence, drawing on the suffering of countless souls to fuel its assault. Yet for all its age and power, the entity lacked something fundamental that Luke possessed. Where Zarakanel knew only domination and consumption, Luke understood harmony and connection. The Force responded to this difference, resisting the daemon's attempts to corrupt its nature. Slowly, methodically, Luke began to push back, not with aggression or hatred, but with calm certainty. The light side flowed through him in cleansing waves, creating islands of purity in the sea of corruption that surrounded them. Zarakanel's mental avatar, a perfect reflection of its physical form, began to shimmer with uncertainty. "What is this?" the daemon demanded. "No mortal mind has ever resisted me." "Thus ought not alone," Luke answered. The faces of those who had guided him appeared in his consciousness, lending him strength. Obi-Wan, Yoda, his father, redeemed in his final moments, and beyond them, the cosmic force itself, the living energy that connected all things. The Daemon Prince recoiled, its beautiful features contorting with the first traces of fear it had known in centuries. This power, it burns, it cleanses. It is anathema to my essence. Luke pressed his advantage, allowing the light to flow outward from his center, pushing back the corruption that surrounded them. In the physical realm, Zarakanel's form began to smoke and sizzle where the purifying energy touched its demonic flesh. Enough. The demon prince snarled, breaking the psychic connection with savage force. The physical world rushed back into Luke's awareness as he staggered backward, momentarily disoriented by the sudden transition. Zarakanel hovered above the ruined deck, its perfect form now marred by patches of blackened flesh that smouldered with internal fires. Its expression was a mixture of rage and newfound caution. "You are more than you appear, Jedi," it acknowledged, "but this contest is far from decided." Before it could resume its attack, the bulkhead to the chamber exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris strode a phalanx of Sisters of Silence, their golden armor gleaming in the emergency lighting, null maidens, whose very presence created voids in the warp energies that permeated the ship. Behind them came inquisitorial stormtroopers. Hellguns charged and aimed, and at their center, a figure in Terminator armor of unusual design, covered in purity seals and inscribed with prayers to the Emperor. The Grey Knight Justicar raised a Nemesis force halberd that blazed with psychic fire, its blade carved with runes of banishment. In the Emperor's name, the Justicar intoned, his voice resonating with psychic power. "I cast you back to the hell that spawned you, Daemon." Zarakan's perfect features twisted in a sen of defiance. "You are too late, slave of the corpse god. The seed has been planted. This one's power will be studied, replicated. The great game continues regardless of your interference." The demon prince raised its forearms, reality distorting around it as it prepared to unleash its full might against the Imperial forces. Luke sensed the massive surge of corrupt energy building, knew that even the elite warriors of Imperium would struggle against such power. Acting on instinct guided by the Force, Luke leapt forward, lightsaber igniting in mid-air. The emerald blade struck true, carving through one of Zarakanel's arms as the demon prepared its attack. Corrupt that burned like acid sprayed from the wound, sizzling where it touched metal and stone. The daemon shrieked in pain and outrage, its concentration shattered. The Grey Knight Justicar seized the opportunity, charging forward with his nemesis, halberd, raised high. Sacred latines poured from his vox grill as he brought the weapon down in a perfect arc that split Zarakanel from shoulder to hip. The Daemon Prince's form began to unravel, its physical manifestation no longer able to maintain coherence in the material realm. "This is not over, Skywalker," it hissed as its essence was dragged back toward the warp rift. "Your light has caught the attention of powers beyond your comprehension. We will meet again in darkness." With a final shriek that echoed through both physical and psychic planes, Zarakanel was banished, the rift sealing behind it with a thunderclap of displaced air. The remaining Chaos forces found themselves cut off from their demonic patron, surrounded by the elite forces of the Inquisition. The battle that followed was brief, but brutal. Luke fought alongside the Imperial forces, his lightsaber cutting through corrupted ceramite with ease, while the Grey Knight and Sisters of Silence systematically purged the demonic taint from the chamber. When the last traitor fell, silence descended upon the ruined deck. The Grey Knight Justicar turned to Luke, his helmets, eye lenses, studying the Jedi with unreadable intent. "You fought well against the Neverborn," the Justicar stated, his voice carrying the weight of psychic resonance even through his helmet's vox. Few mortals withstand direct contact with such an entity without corruption. Luke deactivated his lightsaber but remained alert. He sensed no immediate hostility from the Grey Knight, but knew the warrior's purpose was the destruction of all warp entities and those who trafficked with them. "The Force protected me," Luke explained simply. The Justicar inclined his head slightly. "This power, you name the Force, it bears investigation." From the debris nearby emerged Inquisitor Rowe, his ornate armor scorched and dented, blood still seeping from a gash across his forehead. "Justicaran," he acknowledged. "The Ordo Malleus responds with characteristic efficiency." "The presence of a Daemon Prince demanded no less," Thalen replied. His attention returned to Luke. This one resisted Zarakanel's corruption through means unknown to our records. Neither the latines of protection nor nullfield technology shielded him, yet he remains untainted. Rowe's expression was unreadable as he studied Luke and knew indeed a most unusual case. He retrieved Luke's lightsaber from where it had fallen during the final confrontation, examining it briefly before returning it to its owner. "It seems we have much to discuss, Skywalker." The aftermath of the demonic incursion transformed the nature of Luke's relationship with the Imperium. Where before he had been treated as a potential threat to be contained and studied, Now he represented a resource of incalculable value, a being who had faced one of mankind's greatest enemies and emerged victorious. 3 days after the battle, Luke found himself not in a containment cell, but in a strategium aboard the Black Ship. Holith projectors displayed tactical information from across the sector, showing the progress of both Tyranid and Chaos forces as they contested Imperial space. Inquisitor Rowe entered, accompanied by Justica Theolon, and a third figure Luke had not met before, a woman whose simple black uniform bore only a small insignia identifying her as a member of the Inquisition. Luke Skywalker, Rowe began formally. Allow me to introduce Inquisitor Seraphina Vex of the Ramen, Ordo Hereticus, and Justica Thalon of the Grey Knights. We represent a conclave formed specifically to address the unique circumstances of your arrival in our reality. Luke inclined his head respectfully. I appreciate this opportunity to speak freely. Inquisitor Vex studied him with calculating eyes that seemed to note and catalogue every detail of his appearance and bearing. The Daemon Prince called you an anomaly, she observed, a being from beyond our reality. Normally such a claim would be dismissed as warp trickery, yet the evidence suggests otherwise. I've told Inquisitor Rowe my story, Luke replied. I have no reason to hide the truth. Truth is a malleable concept when the warp is involved, Vex countered. However, your resistance to demonic corruption is undeniable. That alone makes you worthy of consideration rather than immediate sanction. Justicaran, who had removed his helmet to reveal a face marked with ritual scars and eyes that had witnessed horrors beyond mortal comprehension, spoke next. The entity you faced was Zerakinel, a greater daemon of Slaanesh. Such beings cannot be truly destroyed in the material realm, merely banished back to the warp. It will return, and it will seek you out. I understand, Luke said. In my reality, we face similar challenges with dark side entities. They rarely accept defeat permanently. Inquisitor Rowe activated a Holith display showing Luke's confrontation with the Demon Prince recorded by picked capturers within the interrogation chamber. The method by which you resisted its psychic assault differs from Imperial techniques. Explain this light side you channeled. Luke considered how to describe concepts that had taken him years to fully comprehend. The Force has aspects, what we call the light side and the dark side. They aren't separate powers but different approaches to the same energy. The light side flows from peace, knowledge, harmony. It's defensive rather than aggressive, protective rather than dominating, and this proved effective against a Daemon Prince, Vex noted skeptically. When our most potent wards and sanctified weapons often fail, the Force isn't native to your reality, Luke explained. It operates on different principles than your warp. The Daemon seemed as surprised by this as you are. It couldn't corrupt what it didn't fully understand. The three inquisitorial representatives exchanged glances, communicating volumes in that silent exchange. Finally, Rowe spoke again. The Conclave has reached a decision regarding your status, Skywalker. You will not be contained or eliminated as protocol might otherwise demand. Instead, you will be granted the unprecedented status of Incustorial Auxiliary, operating under direct supervision on missions of critical importance. Luke sensed there was more to this offer than mere pragmatism. Why? Justicalan answered, his voice grave. Because war approaches on a scale this sector has not witnessed in millennia. The Tyranid hive fleet that you encountered was merely a splinter of a far larger organism. The Chaos forces led by Zerakinel represent a coordinated offensive by the servants of the Dark Gods, and there are whispers of other powers stirring in the void. The Imperium stands upon a precipice, Vex continued. Resources are stretched beyond capacity. Every asset must be utilized if humanity is to survive. And I'm considered an asset, Luke stated, neither accepting nor rejecting the designation. You have proven your combat effectiveness against both Xenos and demonic threats, Rowe confirmed. More importantly, you possess knowledge and abilities outside our existing paradigms. Such advantages cannot be discarded due to doctrinal inflexibility. The pragmatism was very imperial, Luke thought. Yet beneath the calculated assessment, he sensed something else in these hardened servants of the Emperor. Hope, however carefully guarded. A quality seemingly rare in this war-torn galaxy. What exactly would this arrangement entail? Luke asked. Rowe gestured to the tactical display. You would accompany inquisitorial forces on priority missions throughout the sector. Your input would be valued, your abilities deployed where they might prove most effective. In return, you would receive access to Imperial resources, protection from those who might otherwise view you as a threat, and our assistance in investigating the circumstances of your arrival. And if I decline," Vex's expression hardened, "then we would be forced to reconsider your classification as a potential asset. The Imperium cannot allow an uncategorized psychic entity to roam freely, regardless of past services rendered." The threat was clear, yet Luke sensed it stemmed not from malice, but from absolute conviction. These people genuinely believed that anything outside their Emperor's direct control represented a potential threat to humanity's survival. Luke closed his eyes briefly, reaching out to the Force for guidance. The currents of this reality remained alien in many ways, yet the underlying principles were familiar. Life, death, balance, purpose. The Force had brought him here for a reason, had placed him in this exact circumstance. "I'll accept your offer," he said finally, with one condition. The Inquisitors waited expectantly. "I remain true to my principles as a Jedi," Luke stated firmly. "I'll defend the innocent, oppose corruption, and seek peaceful solutions where possible. I won't participate in actions that contradict these values." A tense silence followed his declaration. Justica Thealon broke it with what might have been the ghost of a smile. "You speak as if there is a choice between your values and the Emperor's will," the Grey Knight observed. "Perhaps there is less contradiction than you imagine." Inquisitor Rowe extended his hand in a formal gesture. "Your terms are accepted, Luke Skywalker. Welcome to the service of the Imperium of Man." As Luke clasped the offered hand, he felt the Force shift around him, paths of possibility resolving into more definite patterns. Whatever purpose had brought him to this war-torn galaxy, he was now committed to seeing it through. The weeks that followed saw Luke integrated into the command structure of Inquisitor Rowe's retinue. He was provided with quarters aboard the Black Ship, access to certain restricted archives to better understand the Imperium he now served, and training in Imperial combat protocols. In turn, he offered insights into his own abilities, demonstrating techniques that left tech priests babbling in binary code and inquisitorial scholars revising theories of psychic potential. His lightsaber became the subject of intense study, though he permitted no attempts to disassemble or replicate it. Luke also began instructing a small cadre of sanctioned psychers in meditation techniques drawn from Jedi traditions. These efforts met with mixed success as the psychers of the Imperium accessed their powers through fundamentally different channels than Force users. Still, several showed improved control and resistance to warp influence after adopting modified versions of Luke's exercises. 63 days after his acceptance into inquisitorial service, Luke stood on the observation deck of the cruiser Righteous Fury, watching as a fleet of Imperial vessels translated into real space around the agri world of Hilistra's Prime. Intelligence suggested that cultists of the ruinous powers had infiltrated the planet's governing hierarchy, preparing the way for a full-scale chaos incursion. Inquisitor Rowe joined him at the viewport, the man's augment eye whirring softly as it adjusted to the starfield. "The Grey Knights have confirmed demonic presence in the capital hive," he stated without preamble. "Justikaran believes Zarakanel's servants prepare a ritual to anchor their master more permanently in the materium." Luke nodded, having sensed the disturbance in the Force long before the fleet's arrival. "The Daemon Prince is obsessed with understanding the Force. It sees me as both a puzzle and a potential source of power." "And what do you sense about our chances?" Rowe asked, the question remarkable coming from a man who rarely sought counsel from others. Luke closed his eyes briefly, reaching out through the Force toward the planet below. He felt the suffering of millions, the corruption spreading through once healthy institutions, the dark energy gathering around ritual sites where unspeakable acts were performed in the name of dark gods. But beneath that darkness, he also sensed resistance, the stubborn determination of Imperial citizens who maintained their faith despite encroaching horror. The discipline of PDF troops preparing final defences around civilian shelters, the small acts of courage that went unrecognised yet held back the tide of despair. "There's still hope," Luke answered finally. "If we move quickly, much can be saved." Rowe's expression remained impassive, but Luke sensed a measure of relief in the Inquisitor's response. "The Emperor protects," he said, the phrase carrying the weight of genuine belief rather than mere ritual. "And so do we," Luke added quietly, lightsaber hanging ready at his belt. As the ships of the Imperial fleet began their descent toward the embattled world below. As dropships and landing craft departed from the cruiser's launch bays, Luke felt the Force coalescing around him, paths of destiny becoming clearer with each passing moment. Whatever cosmic purpose had drawn him across realities to this war-torn galaxy, he was committed now to seeing it through. The Jedi Knight stood ready as the boarding ramp lowered, revealing the burning cityscape of Helostrax Prime's capital hive. Somewhere in that labyrinth of corruption and suffering, servants of darkness prepared to welcome their demonic master back to the material realm. Somewhere in that same city, innocent lives cried out for deliverance from horrors beyond comprehension. Luke Skywalker ignited his lightsaber, its emerald blade, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. The war for this reality had only just begun.